Hello, my name is Fred Irby III. I'm professor of music at Howard University. I'm here at Mr. Henry's Restaurant and Bar, and I'm talking to jazz vocalist extraordinaire, Mr. George V. Johnson. I first met George back in the 70s. John Malachi, the great John Malachi, introduced me to him and told me that he was the next one. And John named him Your Majesty, which is a phrase that he used when he described Charlie Parker. So to be mentioned in the same breath as Charlie Parker is amazing. George, where's your hometown, sir?
Thank you, Fred. My hometown is right here in Washington, D.C. I was born in 1950 at Columbia Hospital and grew up right here in Washington, 1950.
Right. So when did you develop a passion for music?
I guess I developed a passion of music when I was a kid. You know, every weekend my father came home with new records. He would have 45 albums. He built his own system and always played music around the house. So we were a musical listening family, dancing family, and so also he had a microphone. He was like a neighborhood DJ. He would always be doing things on the microphone, talking. And when he was gone, I would turn on the system and imitate those records that he would play. So that's actually how I first started getting into the music.
Okay. So when did you develop a passion for jazz?
I developed a passion for jazz probably 8, 9 years old. The resident manager where we lived at on Benning Road, he was a piano player. His name was Spencer Payne. So he played. He was a local pianist in all the clubs and hotels, and he had jam sessions at his house. You know, several times a month. You know, musicians. I don't know if they were rehearsals or whatever, jam sessions. And he had siblings, and we had siblings. And we'd be the little kids peeking out the bedroom doors or hiding under tables, watching the grown-ups dancing and partying and playing music. And that's when it was probably in my soul. Because a lot of the people who would be in those jam sessions would be guys that you know, like Jimmy Cobb and Keita Best and Shirley Horn and different people like that. Those are the people that I saw as a kid growing up. And that's how I got into the music.
Okay. When did you develop a passion for jazz vocalists?
I think probably around when my father started playing Moody's Move for Love by King Fletcher. He used to play that very often. And so I think all of us learned that song. I think everybody knew that song. There I go, there I go, there I go, there I go. And he used to always play Eddie Jefferson and John Hendricks and Little Anthony and the Imperials and Temptation, James Brown, and then I just kept on singing, man. And what happened was I was driving Metro bus. This went on until I was in my teens. I was driving Metro bus, and I heard on a broadcast about the Pigfoot, a jazz club opening up by Bill Harris called the Pigfoot. And I went to the Pigfoot, and I signed up for the workshop, and there was John Malachi. And he called my name, and he said, "What would you like to sing?" I said, "A Night in Tunisia." He looked at me and said, "What do you know about A Night in Tunisia?" I said, "I don't know. Just play it just like the record by Eddie Jefferson or Dizzy Gillespie." He played it, and that was my introduction to the music. You know, I never stopped.
Okay. I'm going to name several clubs that are associated with Washington, D.C. And can you give me your impressions of these clubs? The Pigfoot.
The Pigfoot, at that time when the Pigfoot opened up, it was owned by Bill and Fannie Harris. It was at 12th and Rhode Island Avenue. That was the number one club, number one black club. And it was two or three other clubs up and down the strip. But the Pigfoot, that was a place, it was 5 nights a week. John featured a singer or musician. Then he had the workshop on a Tuesday night. So 5, 6 nights a week, it was always something going on. And musicians from all over the world would come to the Pigfoot to see John, because John was one of the most respected musicians around the world. So if Lou Donaldson or Art Blakey or whoever was in town, they would come to the Pigfoot. And that's where I would hang out 5 nights a week.
Okay. Blues Alley Supper Club.
Blues Alley, Blues Alley is probably one of the best clubs in the country, as far as style and class, where all the big name acts came, right in Georgetown. And I first performed there in 1979. I did a tribute to Eddie Jefferson there with John Malachi. And Blues Alley is probably one of the #1 clubs in the country. I'm sorry to see that it's gone.
Yeah. One Step Down.
One Step Down, that was a hangout spot. Lawrence Wheatley had a workshop there, and Reuben Brown and Ann Mabuchi, her and her husband Joe, they were the owners. And that was like the local hangout for many years. And actually, I played there with James Moody and Lou Donaldson.
What about Harold Rogan Jar?
Harold Rogan Jar, that was owned by Professor Harold Kaufman. No, he was a Dr. Harold Kaufman. And that was a spot, that was like 18th and around 18th and P, something like that. And so that was Reuben Brown, Marshall Hawkins, and Bernard Sweetie. And then every week they would bring in local national acts.
Okay, right. Now, Washington, D.C. has had some musicians who are institutions. So I'm just gonna call out several names, and can you respond to those names? Buck Hill.
Buck Hill, they called him the Wailing Mailman, tenor saxophonist. Buck Hill was a staple in Washington, D.C. Matter of fact, he was one of those musicians I was around when I was a kid. I first met him later on through John Malachi, and I always enjoyed playing with Buck. Buck was one of those musicians, every city has one, where he's one of the greatest musicians, but he never left. And that's where Buck was,
Okay, John Malachi.
Shoot, John Malachi was, next to Duke Ellington, John was probably one of the most respected musicians in Washington, D.C. John Malachi. And he was a great educator, great pianist. He was with the Billy Eckstine Big Band with the Killer Players. That's when he had Miles and Art Blakey and Dizzy and Fashion Navarro and different people like that, Lucky Thompson, and, Gene Ammons. That band was Charlie Parker. And John played with all these musicians. And so whenever when John would play at a different club, they would always come through to see John,
Shirley Horn.
Shirley Horn went to school with my father. They went to Shaw Junior High. I have pictures of Shirley. And she was one of the musicians I was around when I was a kid. And then after John left the Pigfoot workshops, Shirley took over the workshop. So when I walked in and told Shirley my name, I said, George Johnson. She said, no, George Johnson, your father, George Johnson, went to Shaw? I said, yeah. So we became very good friends, me and Shirley. And she was a sweetheart. As a matter of fact, my favorite song that we loved doing together was Summertime. And I sung that at a funeral. As a matter of fact, I went to visit her the day before she died. I was up at the hospital sitting with her, and she was Shirley was a good friend of mine.
Okay, Calvin Jones.
Calvin Jones. Calvin Jones, I met Calvin, I guess in the 60s as well. We went to the same church. You went to the same War Memorial Church. And Calvin was a great musician, a great teacher, great educator, and he was a great person. He came out, these musicians that I'm naming, everybody, it was a close-knit group of musicians here in DC. Everybody respected each other and played with each other. And Calvin, up in UDC, he put out a lot of great musicians. Got a great program up there.
Okay, Rick Henderson.
Rick Henderson. I met Rick through John Malachi. He was a great arranger and composer. I performed with him a couple of times. Matter of fact, in 1975, when they did the grand reopening with Howard Theater, Rick Henderson was in that band. I was the vocalist with that band. And Rick Henderson was a great alto player. Oh my gosh. He would come and sit in with John, and then, he played with a lot of the big band stuff. He was a great musician.
Mhm. Charlie Hampton.
Charlie Hampton, wow. So Charlie was a great piano player as well as a great saxophone player. I loved him on the alto sax. Charlie was a great alto saxophone player, and he was a pianist with that big band up at Howard Theater when they did the grand opening. And he held workshops. He took over the Pitchfork workshop after Shirley left. It was John, then it was Shirley, and then Charlie Hampton.
Okay. Today we are in this historic venue.
Oh yes.
This is where Roberta Flack was discovered by Cannonball. I think it was Cannonball and somebody else.
Les McCann.
Who?
Les.
Yeah, Les McCann.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Did you ever see her perform here?
No, I didn't see Roberta perform here. When I started coming up here, it was around about 1971. I think it was a guy named Stanley Woodruff. Stanley Woodruff was playing here. Matter of fact, he played here for about 20 years. He sang up here every week, about 20 years, Stanley Woodruff. But I drove Metro bus right up and down the street. I was a Metro bus driver, the 30 line. And this was the Capitol Hill. Mr. Henry has always been a classy club. It's always been a classy club.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of jazz, especially jazz musicians, what are some of the trends that you see in this music that should be addressed?
As far as the musicians or clubs or people?
All of that.
Well, as far as, in DC, as far as the venues, there's a lot of opportunities here in Washington, DC, but you have a lot of people that are running things in DC that are not from DC. So that affects the music as well. As far as the young musicians, oh man, I can't say enough. There's so many young talented musicians in this town, but it's different from what it was when we was coming up, you know. And so far the music seems like it's growing. You got young men like Don Bonte and Samuel Prather, you know, that are playing music. They're taking it to the next level. The music is changing now. Because, you know, a lot of the clubs, they want music, they want jazz, but they want something they can dance on, that danceable music. And that's what's happening with the music in a lot of the clubs now, because the young people want to dance, like the 18th Street Lounge. So you got a different style of music for each one of these clubs. So the musicians, when we were growing up in the 70s, I was singing with Moody, we always had on suits. So now everything has changed. Everything is regular now. People are just regular. It's about the music now, you know. So
Yeah. Jimmy Heath once told me the same thing you said, that people want to dance. Music has always been about dance and sound. And he said that musicians had a tendency to move away from that. They didn't want to be associated with dance. And back from the beginning of time, back in the early days, Renaissance music, romantic music, contemporary music and dance have been sister and brother, brother, sister. Do you think that the music has moved from that perspective?
I think it depends on the venues. Because, you know, I think when we were dancing, it was like house parties. And then the music went to the concert stage and clubs. People were sitting down, you know, drinking. But as far as the music, I've always been the type of, it depends on the person too. I'm the type of entertainer, I'm gonna dance and move around because that spirit hits me. Once that spirit hits me, I'm gonna dance and move around. Everybody's not like that, you know. You got some singers that just stand up. I like to dance. So I prefer music. I wanna make people happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you gotta be able to realize those certain things. Sometimes you gotta be able to choose a particular song where you're gonna make people dance, you know.
Right. And speaking of dance, when dance, the genre of dance went to the concert stage, they didn't take the musicians with them. They started using recordings.
Oh, yeah.
So it hasn't been a good thing for us in that in that particular situation. Now, what do you think about we as music in this business? Musicians are not being compensated as much as they should. When I say compensated, I'm not just talking about a salary, but retirement, health insurance, unemployment insurance. So how would you address those things?
It's a very tough question because you see how I addressed it. I grew up differently. When I was growing up, my father raised me to be a man, you had to have a job. And when you turn 18, you're getting out of here. So I've always been a person that had a job. You know, I worked for UPS, I drove Metro bus, I worked for the railroad. I was conditioned to have a family, have kids. To have a kid, you gotta have a job. Music was never an option for me to be a professional or anything like that. So I'm lucky because in my case, I worked at railroad, I had railroad retirement, so I got my health insurance. And that was the one thing that I learned from James Moody back in the 80s. Moody told me, he said, George, keep your job. Because he told me just like this, he said, George, keep your job. This is in 85 because with my name and my background, I can't even buy a house or a car. So we have to, for nowadays, the musicians have a job and luckily they have a degree. A lot of musicians have a degree to have a job, so they got this insurance, but it's rough. I don't know what really to say. I don't know how you can, other than that, having a job, having a teaching job.
Okay, because there are a lot of musicians feel that music is their job. They don't have to go outside of music. People that are in symphony orchestras, I know the musicians that play in jazz and Lincoln Center, that music is their job. And what they do is they play and they write. But I think that a lot of people look at this as something that you do on the side.
Fun or something.
Right. Yeah. And so they treat you like that too,
So I guess it has to be negotiated. Something has to be done,
Okay. Do you think there should be more community involvement, like with the government, with the churches, recreation centers? Do you think that Washington, D.C. deserves a repertory orchestra here? Just like jazz at Lincoln Center?
Most definitely. That's why we need some more young people with some bright minds to start creating things instead of just thinking about music. It's a whole business to this thing. That's what I like about what Herb Scott is doing here with the Capitol Hill Jazz Foundation. This young cat, this young brother, he's building. And this is what we got to continue to do. Maybe that's something that it will eventually happen within the foundation.
Okay. What do you think the city government could do?
Well, we need representation. We need somebody in there representing us. Because if nobody's asking for these things, it's not going to happen. We got to have some type of representation and an active organization pushing them, telling them what they need.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've had an amazing career as a singer. Can you name some of the highlights of your career?
The highlight of my career was probably meeting Eddie Jefferson. One of the highlights, meeting Eddie Jefferson, because he was like my idol. Like my Superman or like my idol. When I met Eddie, it was like the greatest thing ever happened in the world. Then I met James Moody, and Moody. Well, it was a particular incident that happened with James Moody that led on to our a long relationship. And so Moody, that's all. James Moody. Unless you want me to get right into the story.
Well, just tell us a little about it.
Well, when Eddie Jefferson died, before he died, I followed him around for about 3 or 4 years. And eventually, after about the 3rd year, he invited me up to sing. And he called me, and it was a surprise. I would follow him to different places. I go visit him. He stay at my house. I visit him on Linden Boulevard. And the third year, I said, where you going? He said, I'm gonna be in Philadelphia. So I drove to Philadelphia. He was playing at the Grindel's Lair. Richie Cole, Gerald Price, Marshall Hawkins, and I think Lester Merrill on drums. And he was singing, and Richie Cole was playing. And it was the last song, and all of a sudden they were playing Janine, and all of a sudden Eddie, he hollered, "This is I Got Rhythm, 5 flats." And then he said, "This is one of my students, Georgie Johnson. He's next in line, next in line, next in." And I had the tape playing, and we went up there and we sang note for note. I got blues and I don't know how to lose. You know, we sang that, man. The audience was wild. And I saved that tape. That was 44 years ago. And I found the tape. I got boxes of cassette tapes, and I recorded that tape and I digitized it. So what I did, I took that 16-second sound bite in 2000 and released my first CD. Because I wasn't getting any notoriety, I said, I'm gonna call the CD Next in Line, and I open it up with that 16-second sound bite. And that 16-second sound bite, this one of my students, Georgie Johnson, he's next, that changed the whole industry, because all the DJs around the country started playing that. Because before that, nobody really knew of George Johnson. So that was one of the highlights. And then the third one was my first recording with Pharoah Sanders. I wrote the lyrics to Moment's Notice in 1974. John was playing at the Bigfoot. He used to always play Moment's Notice. So I said, "John, I wrote the lyrics to your song." He said, "No, get Blue Train." So I got Blue Train. I wrote the lyrics to Moment's Notice. I practiced them for 6 years. So when I moved to New York, I was hanging out with Leon. And Leon said, "George, meet me at the Vanguard because Pharoah Sanders is going to be there." So I went to the Vanguard. He was in the kitchen. He said, "Pharoah, this is George. He sang with Moody, Lou Johnson." So Pharoah said, "Would you like to sing one?" I said, "Yes." So he said, "What would you like to sing?" I said, "Moment's Notice." And he said, "Tell John Hicks what you want." And I sang Moment's Notice. Turned the club out. A week later, Pharoah called me and said, "George, we're going to be in New York City. Would you like to hang out with us?" And when I got there, it was Power Station Studio. There's Billy Higgins, Bobby Hutcherson, John Hicks, Mary Baraka, all these musicians was in there. So I sat there like 2 hours and watched them. And suddenly Pharoah walked up to me and said, "George, would you like to sing Moment's Notice, sing your lyrics?" And that's how I did my first record date. So those 4 moments right there were like key moments in my life that changed my whole life.
Okay, now, as you know, we are on the other side, almost on the other side of this COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank God.
Yeah. So where do you see your career moving forward? What do you think about the future of your career as a musician now?
Well, Fred, I'm hoping to record some of these lyrics. You know, I've written lyrics to I've worked on a couple of projects. I have lyrics to about 45 of Hank Mobley's compositions, about 35 of Charlie Parker. So my dream right now is to finally record these things. You know, I've been practicing. And I just want to record these Mobley things. This is probably enough for 5 or 6 CDs. So I like to record, go on tour, and maybe eventually do this jazz opera. You know, because I wrote a jazz opera around the music of Hank Mobley. Mm-hmm. So I like to eventually do that on stage and then teach workshops. So right now, you know, I just did 2 workshops at Howard University. I like to continue doing workshops because I feel that the art of jazz vocalist should be in all the colleges, because kids need to know about writing lyrics to Charlie Parker and John Coltrane. They need that one-on-one. They need one-on-one instructions. They got, because there's nobody teaching it. There's nobody teaching it.
Mm-hmm. So is there anything you would like to say about jazz in Washington, D.C.?
Jazz is never going to die. It's going to always be alive. And I just wish that all the young fellas would just keep on practicing, keep on creating, and take care of the business as well as take care of the music. And the music will survive. Love each other, treat each other like human beings. Don't lie, don't steal. And just practice. Whatever you put in, you're going to get out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fred. That's terrific. Really, really good. I'd like to, if I may, one thing you said that, if we could amplify on it, you talk about, you're talking about being a bus driver. And I think if you could talk a little more about your experience being a bus driver. And if you go to number 30, then you went through the whole town. Yes, I was on, they call the conductor's board. Okay, hold on a second. You ready, Sam? Yep. I started driving Metro buses. Talk to
Okay.
Irby, not to me.
Okay.
And the whole thing.
Want me to ask him a question?
Oh, sure, that'd be great.
Okay.
I think you've seen the history
The
of
railroad too,
segregation.
yeah.
And
Oh, yeah, the
so,
50s, 60s, yeah.
So, as a bus driver, you have a pretty strong perspective on the Washington of that era.
Also, he was a train.
Yeah, sure.
I retired as a train conductor, New Jersey Transit.
Yeah, sure.
Can you reflect on your experiences as a bus driver in Washington, D.C., and also as a employee of the railroad?
Metro bus. I started driving Metro bus in 1972. That was the year that it went from DC Transit to Metro bus. Now, I grew up in the 50s. So, though in DC, there was a lot of racism here, we didn't have to ride the bus, but you still had to know your place. See, I was born in 1950, so I remember Emmett Till, all those things. I recall one time we was living in Detroit Park, and I recall me and my brothers and sisters, at that time it was just 3 of us, we'd get on the bus, and my mother and my sisters, they would all go to the back, and I'm a little kid, I'd jump in, sit in the first seat, and the white people were looking at you like that. You know what I mean? So and she'd be talking about, come on in the back. And, you had to always know your place. And I recall, as a matter of fact, I was on the bus. They had a working board where I knew every run in Washington, D.C. It was a very interesting career, especially the 30 line. So the 30 line, I used to go past Duke Ellington School of Performing Arts every day. And in the 70s, Wallace Roney, his brother, Ron Sutton, Dave Marsh, all those little guys used to catch my bus when I was a Metro bus driver. They used to all call me Mr. Johnson. And so, DC was very interesting. And then after I left here, and I got to New York, I married Carolyn in 82. Because, I went to Howard in 79. We toured Europe with Raisin. We came back. I wanted to go to New York. And I needed a job. And I applied, and I got the job with Metro. I got the job with DC, with New Jersey Transit. I applied for Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, Power Company, Telephone Company. All of them came through at one time. And I took the New Jersey Transit, and I started working on the railroad. And at the same time, I was singing with James Moody. So, I was living in Trenton. So almost like 20-some years, I'm in New York City, I was out every night. I was at all the clubs and working on the trains, I was on the conductor's list. So I was qualified on all the lines in New Jersey. The Corridor, the Coast Line, the Raritan Line, the Hoboken Line, the Summit Line, Atlantic City Line. So if I'm singing with James Moody 5 nights and we get off at 1 o'clock, at the Village Vanguard, I get a call 3 hours before I got to be out. I got to be in Atlantic City, or I got to be down in Bayhead. So I was almost killing myself on the highway. And in them days, you had the beeper. And each time that Carolyn went into labor, I was on stage with James Moody. So I had to rush down the highway, rush here and rush there. So that was the one thing. And working on the railroad, what helped me to get a home. I had a home. We had a big house. My kids went to private school. I had everything. So the railroad and driving the bus was very important in my life. And that's how I was able to survive around this whole music thing, because I never had to depend on the, I've never depended. I just did the music for love. I never thought that I would be in this position, making money and even this good. So I'm very thankful, for the railroad and driving the bus. DC, I love Washington, D.C. I love Washington, D.C.
Could we, because y'all had some really kind of juicy stuff that you were talking about before. And
how I met Moody? Because that'll blow your mind right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you gotta talk a little bit about that, and also don't feel, I don't want you to feel restricted by the fact that we record, just have a conversation
Okay,
about this.
ask me about how I moved to New York.
Okay, how did you move to New York, George?
Well, in 1978, I was recruited to come to Howard, by Keita and Kurt Stewart. And they asked me did I want to go to school? I said, yeah. So they had me I met Henrietta Evans. And so I went to, they were doing the Broadway musical Raisin and Sound and Soul. It was sponsored by the Swiss government. So we went to Switzerland. We did Raisin. We say Gallon, Geneva, Zurich, Bern, Appenzell, Luzerne, Milano, Lugano. And so while we was in Paris, France, I got a telegram from Bill Harris saying, sorry to inform you, Eddie Jefferson is dead. That was May 9th, 1979. So Raisin closed on the 29th of May, and I came back home. And I was distraught because Eddie was gotten murdered. I had $350. I had 3 suitcases. I jumped on a Metro bus. I still got the transfer from that day, October 24th, and I got on a train and moved to New York. I moved to New York. I arrived at Penn Station, and I put my stuff in the lockers. It was 50 cents a day. And that first night, I went to see Lou Donaldson. Then I went to the Tim Palace to see George Coleman, Harold Mayburn, Jamil Nasser, and Philly Joe. I sat in both of them. So I had no place to live that night. So I rode the A train all night. Back and forth. I went back to Penn Station. It was so easy. I did that for like 3 months. I rode the trains for 3 months. That's how I survived. And then I was hanging out with Barry Harris because he had the Jazz Culture Theater then, and Jim Harrison. So they were part of the Jazzmobile. Jimmy Heath, Billy Taylor. So anyway, one day I was hanging with Barry and Jim Harrison because he had the Jazz Spotlight News. They said, George, they're doing a tribute to Eddie Jefferson up at the Carnegie Hall, and they got the Manhattan Transfers. They got Dizzy, Bob McFerrin. They had Richie Cole. And Harold Mayburn was playing, and they had the Hendricks. And so he said, take that tape up there, because they heard the tape, the next online tape. They want John Hendricks to hear it. So he said, go up there and say, we said, come see you. So I knocked on the door at Carnegie Hall about 12 o'clock that day. And I gave the tape. I said, my name is George P. Johnson. I was a friend of Eddie Jefferson. And Barry and Jim said, listen to this tape. He took the tape, went upstairs, it says, he came back down, excited. Oh man, we love this tape. We're gonna play it on the loud system, Carnegie Hall, and let everybody hear it. And he came back, he said, be back up here at 6 o'clock. I came back up at 6 o'clock. I called my mother because I was riding the subway then. And I said, Mom, I'm gonna sing at Carnegie Hall. I was excited. She said, what do you need? So she sent me $100, Western Union. And I got the money. I went to Andy's Cheapies on St. Mark's Place. It was a thrift store, and I got some clothes. I got some gabardine slacks, white jacket, red tie, white shirt. Went back to Carnegie Hall, ready to sing. John Hendricks come down. George, we can't let you sing. I said, why not? He said, because there's nobody to play for you. I said, somebody to play for you. There's Harold Mayburn, Rupert Reed, Eddie Gladden. They was with Eddie's band. He said, I'll be right back. He came back down. He said, George, sorry, man, we can't let you sing. After the third time, I was basically in tears. He said, well, come on upstairs. So I go upstairs. There's Dizzy, there's Moody, there's Mayburn, Bob McFerrin. All of them was sitting around. And I got to Manhattan Transfers. And they had a new record out called The Boys from New York City. The Contours singing. Do-ah, cool, cool kitty, talking about the boys. So they were celebrating their new album. So that's what the concert was really about. The Manhattan Transfers, their new album. And so I was standing there talking. And so John Hendricks walked up to me and said, George, you got to go now. He had these 2 big guys behind him. So on my way out, Moody grabbed me by the arms. He said, George, be at Sweet Basil's at 9 o'clock. So I get to Sweet Basil's. The club is packed. All of them in the club. All the people I named was in the club. Moody introduced me. Said, this is George B. Johnson. This is Eddie Jepson's protege. And brought me up. And I sang. Moody played. Dizzy played. Turned the club out. It was nice. After that gig, Moody gave me $200. I never slept on the trains again. And then he told me a story. He told me this story about this man trying to win the Irish sweepstakes, how he kept playing it and playing it and playing it. Then finally he won the Irish sweepstakes. It was supposed to be $1 million in a trip around the world. The boat got in the middle of the ocean. The boat sank. The show sank. They wouldn't even let Eddie Jepson's son say anything or sing Moody's Move for Love. This is how bad that thing looked. And the newspapers ate it up. And so I learned a lesson from that. This business can be very shrewd. And some people you think are good, but that business practice is, it's just one of those things. So be prepared for the hurt. Be prepared for all that, So that's how I met James Moody. And from night to night on, I went on to sing with Moody for about 10 years straight. And then after it got too busy on the railroad, I told Moody I couldn't do it no more. And it hurt me because I was singing with the greatest musician in the world. All of a sudden, I wasn't doing anything. I was just working on the railroad and teaching.
Mm-hmm. Great story.
So that was my story. And I just started telling people about that story, And sleeping on the subway with one eye open, that's like a movie. Every night was like a different adventure, believe me. It was some nights where I had to fight. I actually had to fight. You know what I mean? You seen the New York subway, how the freaks be out. New York is something else. So, you got to be, and I wouldn't advise anybody else to do that. As a matter of fact, I was singing on the street with George Brake. That saved my life. We were singing at 59th and Broadway, 48th, Washington Square Park, and that saved my life, singing on the streets. And now they got posters and ID cards and everything like that. People come around the world to sing on the streets of New York. When we were singing out there, Carter was running from re-election. They came up there and pounded all our instruments, our microphones, George Brake microphones, Mark Johnson's drums, bass, Billy Johnson's drums, because they were playing with, and they took it. And so what we did, we put a young white guitarist in the band to see if they was going, because they wouldn't mess with the white musicians. So we was playing out there for about 3 or 4 months. And all of a sudden they came up and took his instruments. And then his father was a politician and he lobbied and lobbied and lobbied. And now they got ID cards, they got banners, they paying tax, and people come around the world to play on the streets of New York. So that's our street. That's our story from the 80s all the way up to there on the streets of New York.
Okay.
That's terrific. I think it's all we're looking for. Actually, just in case there's an answer to this, you mentioned Mr. Henry's back in the day and all, but again, driving the number 30 bus, you went by here every day.
Every day.
Anything about this neighborhood you want to say?
When I was growing up, Capitol Hill always goes all the way down to Southeast now. When I was growing up, Capitol Hill was only like maybe about 7, 8 blocks. 8th Street was out downtown. I lived on Benning Road. I went to Spingarn. I lived on Benning Road at Southeast down by Simple City. And 8th Street was out downtown. 8th Street, 7th Street, 14th Street was out downtown. Because it was places, like when I was young, growing up with my brothers and sisters, my mother would take us, she liked Buster Brown shoes. I remember it was a place downtown, we couldn't try on shoes. We had to put the shoe beside our feet. Now imagine that, what that does to a kid. This is things you had to go through back in the 50s in Washington, D.C. So, but I used to drive up and down here every day, either 30 line, the F line, the N4. See, I remember we was at Glen Echo in the day it burned down. We was at Glen Echo. We had to walk all the way from Glen Echo to Southeast.
What?
That's out there where you live at, way out there, Glen Echo. That was the day we was out there the day it burned. So we followed about 200 black people walking up Mass Avenue, being followed by police and helicopters. Wasn't no cell phones, and there wasn't no telephone booth. So we had to walk from Glen Echo to Benning Road Southeast. That was the longest walk I ever did. So that was some of the things, you know. That was the night that Glen Echo burned down to the ground. Thank you very much. Y'all can mix that up
Thank
the
you.
way you want.
That was great.